Hey there and welcome to the channel. You're watching The Light in My Library. So today we're talking about The Hero of Ages, the climactic conclusion to the Mistborn trilogy. I'm going to go ahead and get this out of the way at the beginning. Spoilers for the earlier books in the Mistborn trilogy, and later on we're going to have spoilers for The Hero of Ages itself. Probably. We'll see. Picking up about a year after the events of the Well of Ascension, we find our heroes now scrambling around the entirety of the Final Empire, trying to find storage caches which the Lord Ruler left for his people in the event of a disaster. That is, a disaster which is now occurring. Okay, you gotta go. I'm sorry. Okay, you gotta go. Mwah. Mwah. Bye-bye, Vin. Where was I? The land is being covered and drowned in ash. The mists last almost all day long, and our heroes have no idea beyond the presence of the entity which Vin released from the Well of Ascension what exactly is causing this. So seeing as this is the last book in the trilogy, there are some pretty startling and dramatic twists and turns, and a lot of secrets revealed. As the saying goes, there's always another secret, and this book has a lot of secrets in it, and a lot of unanswered questions at the end for the greater Cosmere. You gotta remember, this book came out when, at the time, there were only 4 books available in the Cosmere, and this book also includes the first mention, for those who care about the greater Cosmere, this book contains the first mention ever in any book of the name Adonalsium. So, although in my copy it has the misprint where it's Adonazum. There's no L in it, which I found rather amusing and continue to find rather amusing to this day. So, getting right into spoilers for the book, I want to just start picking out some favorite moments from each book as I review them. I'm really having a hard time figuring out my exact format here and kind of just learning it on the fly. So if you'll bear with me as these videos change radically from video to video and I kind of start to get the hang of what I'm doing. One moment that's always stood out to me as one of my favorite scenes in the whole book is actually Preservation's death, and then I said spoilers, right? Sazed's commentary on it at the beginning of the very next chapter. There's always been a sense of gravitas to my reading that death scene, which I don't think was diminished in any way with spoilers for greater Mistborn saga, but with the new perspective we get on it in Mistborn Secret History, I think that only lends to it being able to see it from the other side, and was actually one of my favorite scenes from that book as well. One of my other favorite scenes is Human, the Koloss, not a human, when he kind of reveals, when Vin pushes on him with Derelium Zinc, and he kind of loses his mind for a minute. That has also like one of my favorite revelations of the series right there. A mystery that had been going on for technically since the beginning of the series, but I mean, the Koloss weren't relevant until the second book. Still, I loved that, the way that they kind of figure out, and I love Human as a character altogether. He's actually, in my opinion, one of the least appreciated characters in the trilogy. So I really like that. Vin's ascension is also definitely like that whole scene where she's in Kedrick Shaw fighting, I think, the 9 Inquisitors all at once, just going head to head and just, getting her ass kicked, and then Marsh has that moment of self-awareness and he rips out the earring and she just trashes them. She's pulling spires out of the ground and smashing them, and it's definitely like one of the scenes that I think Brandon definitely put in the work to earn that. Because I don't think that scene would land anywhere near as well if that had been the power level going throughout the entire series. And I also think he earns it doubly because it doesn't fall into the issue of power creep that you see in a lot of anime and a lot of other fantasy stories, where now all the scenes have to be this powerful, this, spectacular. He doesn't fall into that issue in the Mistborn saga, or even just throughout the rest of this book. Granted, there's not a lot of fight scenes throughout the rest of the book, but I think he does a really good job of then realistically pulling back, especially in Era 2, which I don't want to get too much into Era 2, but he does a really good job of pulling back so that the story can still have high stakes and it can still be spectacular, but it doesn't have to be at that level with every single scene that happens in order to do that. And it's honestly a pretty impressive feat. Basically an entire plot line that I want to highlight here is Tensoon's whole trial. The entire storyline with Tensoon, I mean, it really solidifies him. I realized after I made the last review that I don't think I mentioned Orsur's and Tensoon, like the dead crew member mystery plot line whatsoever. I don't think I mentioned Orsur by name or Tensoon by name, but Tensoon is definitely a standout character for the Mistborn saga as a whole, and particularly in this first trilogy. He's right up there, probably one of my 5 favorite characters from the first trilogy. So I definitely wanted to make sure to highlight him as a character in this video, and his plot in this video, in this book, is phenomenal. Character who kind of falls by the wayside until the end of this book. A lot of people have a lot of gripes with Sazed's plotline in this book and his moral, philosophical, religious meandering. But I find that it actually works for me really well. And it might just be that I grew up in a fairly religious community myself, but I actually really like the way that Sanderson handles his religious quest. I mean, it does show Sazed's personality quite a bit, the way in which he goes about it, the way that he was trained as a rational scholar his whole life, and he had this hope that is why he loved the religion. It's why he cared about. That's why it was his particular study. But he was at his core a scholar. And when that hope died with Twindle in the last book, who's another character that I don't think I highlighted in the last video, and I really should have. But when Twindle died, she killed his hope, and so this thing that he had dedicated his life to, he has to go, now that the feeling's gone out of it, so to say, he can't, the other part of him, the rational part, has to go through and try to find his new moral truth. And I like both. I mean, it does kind of wear at times to read it, but I like its execution and I like its resolution, and that is a pretty unpopular opinion within the Mistborn fan base, but I'm going to stick by it. I actually would say, having read this book a dozen times, I have to say that his plotline in this book is actually one of the least... It stood up some of the best to rereads of any of the plot lines in the series. So I'm actually going to give that a thumbs up. Definitely a character that I need to highlight in this one is Spook. Spook is actually one of my all-time favorite characters ever. And it's all down to his character development in this book, and particularly, and on top of that, it's the way that he starts out as an absolute background character. I think he's in 4 or 5 scenes in the first book. He has maybe 10 lines of dialogue, and then by the time this book comes around, he is a main character. He is one of the 3 main plot drivers for this book, and he is engaging, and he's making mistakes because he's still a young, dumb 16-year-old, and he's doing foolish things, and he's damaging his body, but he's trying, and he's doing his best, and I think that it really has an impact on the entire flavor, the entire essence of what Mistborn is. To see, I mean, Vin was his age and killing the Lord Ruler and freeing all the Ska, and basically only makes 2 or 3 important, relevant mistakes throughout the entire trilogy, whereas Spook is making mistakes left and right. You come to find out at the end of his plotline that he was being guided by a nefarious force the entire time, and that basically everything he did was misinformed and misdirected. And it really humanizes not just him, but all the characters, I think, by comparison. To see, no, this isn't a fantasy book where all the characters are infallible, where they're all going to make the perfect decision and they're all going to save the day. It's just that those characters really are good at doing what they're doing. And this character is really good and has a really good heart, but he's still going to make his mistakes. I think having him there making those mistakes, along with Sazed, since Sazed is one of the main people that he interacts with in this one, I think it really does a lot to humanize everyone. So, with that out of the way, I'm going to jump into the review here, into the rating here, I should say. So I'm going to give the prose in this book a 7 out of 10. I'm sorry, Sanderson, it's just, the Mistborn trilogy in a lot of ways is his weakest prose writing of any of his books. Lantris is a lot better. I'd actually put... Now I'm just getting into a discussion of all of Brandon Sanderson's prose. That's a future video, so stay tuned for that one. I'm going to rank the prose writing in all of Brandon Sanderson's books that he's ever written. I'm going to do it. I'm going to give the prose in this one a 6 out of 10 stars. I don't remember what I gave the prose in the previous books. I would put this just a step below Well of Ascension. So whatever I gave Well of Ascension, just put a 1 number below that. I think that the Well of Ascension for the Mistborn trilogy has the best prose. These ones are better. The prose in this book are better than in the first book, and they are serviceable. They do their job. I just think that it's not the peak of the series, of the trilogy, in terms of quality. I'm going to give the plotline in this book 8 out of 10 stars. I think that, a lot of things come to a head in this book, and he does a really good job throughout the entire trilogy of introducing new character conflicts in each book and introducing new plot threads in each book, so that in a lot of ways, each of the books in the Mistborn trilogy stands on its own. But I'm going to give this one extra points because not only does it have its own unique... a lot of times I forget that Yeoman is a character exclusive to this book. When I think about characters from the Mistborn trilogy and I think about Yeoman, I forget that he's only in this last book. And so not only does it have that kind of more self-contained I don't know if that tracks, if that follows, if that makes sense to what I'm saying. But not only does it have that self-contained aspect that the first two books did, it also pays good on the promises made. I mean, everyone's pointed out the weight of the world on his arms line, right? Like, it pays good on things, on promises that were made in the first very beginning of the trilogy, and some of them you didn't even know were there. So I'm going to go ahead and give this one 8 out of 10 for plot. We're going to give it a... Let's see, what should we do next? Let's do for revelations. We're going to give this one a 10 out of 10. Awesome. Just the twists and the turns, and just really a surprising and yet well executed conclusion to questions that have been in the background the entire trilogy. And it is one of the things that is most highly praised about the Mistborn trilogy, so I don't think I'm going to get a lot of people disagreeing with me. There's a lot of secrets, and their revelations are 10 out of 10. And for characters, we're going to give this book a 9 out of 10. I think that this has the best character work of any of the books in the first trilogy. Vin does wear a little bit thin, like leading up, particularly in the ballroom scene, where she's kind of going through those trust issues, which it makes sense for an actual person, just because they have learned to rationally accept that they're loved doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to feel that all the time. And so it makes sense, but it does wear a little thin that she's still struggling with some of these trust issues and still dealing with these things. It works for the character, but aside from Vin, every other character I think really has a spotlight, and a lot of people complain about Sazed, but I disagree. They really have a spotlight shown on them in this book, and it introduces, like I said, several of my favorite characters. Yeoman and, Yeoman is one of my favorite characters, but it also is the reason why several of my other favorite characters are my favorite characters, is what they do in this book with Tensoon and Spook, and even Elend really comes into his own. I mean, he's been there throughout the entire trilogy, but this is when Elend is the Elend that I think of. He's weathered and older, and he's made very serious mistakes, and he has to live not necessarily according to his moral values, but to save people, he does what he has to do. And I think that it's really well earned for him. And also, I wanted to point out one of the moments that I realized I forgot to mention that's one of my all-time favorites is another Elend scene. It's his death scene. It's his Derelium Adium blast, and he sees it, and he says, it makes sense, and then he gets his head cut off, and I think it's one of the best death scenes in any book I've read, honestly. So, for this book, we're going to go ahead and give it, I'm going to do it, I'm going to say 8.5 out of 10 stars. 9 out of 10 stars. We're going to go 9 out of 10 stars. 9 out of 10 stars for the Hero of Ages. It's not particularly... I said in my previous video, Well of Ascension is my favorite of the Mistborn trilogy, but there's so much here in this book, and I feel like the other aspects, aside from the prose, the other aspects of what make Mistborn great really come to shine the most here in this book. So that's my rating, 9 out of 10 stars. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe if you will, and hit that notification button to stay up to date. You can follow me over on Twitter at the Light My Library, or on Instagram at Light My Library. You can follow me on Twitch, where I play classic games, Roller Coaster Tycoon. I'm playing Populous at the beginning, something you probably never heard of, and several others. So follow me over there. I stream every Tuesday and Thursday at 4:30 Mountain Daylight Time, and every other Sunday at noon. So check those out if you want to, and thank you all for watching.